Welcome to another edition of It's a Long Beach Thing. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and like us on Instagram and on Facebook. I know we are going to have a strong conversation about faith, courage, and overcoming the odds with this episode. I'm very, very happy to bring this gentleman on to the podcast. He is very, very strong in his faith, very, very strong in the community. And I think it's going to lead to a great conversation. So, Jeff Levine from the Long Beach Rescue Mission, what's going on today?
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks, Paul, for the opportunity to just come and chat and share about life and faith and mission and everything that God's doing here.
Right on. Well, let's dive in, shall we?
Yeah,
What's your first association with this great city of Long Beach?
yeah. So I was born and raised here in Long Beach. This is home. There's no place like home. Did a little bit of visits to other parts of the United States, and I can tell you, there's we pay a premium, but there's no place like Long Beach, Southern California. It's a great place to live. So,
Right. So, what high school did you go to?
oh, Millikan High School. Well, I did kind of the scenic route in high school. So, struggling through an addiction during the time that I was in school. So I started at Lakewood, got kicked out, ended up at Millikan, dropped out, and then got back in my junior year and graduated by the skin of my teeth. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
went to Long Beach City uh, for part of my educational journey. Did my associates there. So, yeah, real rooted in the city of Long Beach.
You mentioned a little bit of your struggles in high school. Where did it
Yeah.
begin? Were you hanging with the wrong crowd, or what do you think was kind of that root of when that started?
Yeah, so I grew up in a very poor family. Actually, they didn't realize that we were the poor family until about junior high when you start to notice the shoes that other people are wearing or the clothes that you have on. But the house I grew up in was a slum. It was infested with cockroaches and fleas, and so there was a lot of shame. And my dad was there, but he wasn't there the way I needed him to be. So he was working 14, 15 hours a day to try and keep our family, afloat. And we orbit around our parents, and when our parents aren't there, we get sucked into the orbit of something or someone else. And in this case, it was, a guy that was about 5 years older than I was. I was 11 at the time, and he was just the coolest. Tattoos, smoked. I just wanted to be like him, and started following him around, and was experimenting with alcohol, with pot, stealing cigarettes from my dad. And one day I walked in on him and my brother doing lines of speed. And I was like, well, I want to try it. I don't know why they said yes. Maybe they were afraid I was going to say something, but, they talk about being instantly hooked. I don't know if that would necessarily be the way I would describe it, but I was chasing that high for 12 years. And, I went from snorting it to smoking it to shooting it. There'd be times when I'd get off the drugs, and I'd grown up in the church, and so I knew what it meant to be in a relationship with Jesus. I was 7 when I prayed and received Christ, was baptized at that point. Didn't understand the commitment that God was making to me and how he would pursue me throughout my wanderings. But there was never any lasting, deliverance. My dad died my senior year of high school. He was 48. I was 17 at the time. I remember thinking that he was so old. And now I'm 45 and I'm like, he was young. So, but when you're an addict, you do what addicts do. And I just pressed deeper into my addiction, and I'd gotten to this place, I'm shooting up, and I remember I'd slam and I'd lay down on the bed and I'd close my eyes, and I would just sincerely pray, God, I don't want to wake up anymore. I'm done. I'm tired. I don't want to do this anymore. And, by his grace, he didn't answer that prayer. He had a purpose and a plan for my life beyond what I could see at that time. And things started to change in the addiction. And, I'd get sober towards the end of the week, I'd run out of money, and then, Tuesday payday would hit, and it'd be a race down the freeway to the dope man's house and pay off what I owed and get high. And, I would just do that. There'd be a cycle where I'd go to church on Sunday and recommit, and things would be good. And then by, the evening on Monday, there was just, I would gag in anticipation of getting high. And, I'd get paid, I'd go to the cash truck out in the parking lot, I'd be driving down the freeway, and the Spirit of God would just whisper in my heart, Jeff, you don't have to do this. Like, you can get off at any exit. You don't have to do this. But my body and my mind just telling me, no, I need this to feel okay. So then I'd get high, and, the whole car ride back, I'd feel, just like an ant, with Satan in my ear, just saying, you did it again. And those feelings of shame and defeat. And, I got to this place where I realized I wanted a relationship with Jesus more than I wanted to get high, but I didn't know how to stop. And even though I knew I was an addict, right? I couldn't get out of bed without getting high. I knew I was an addict. Um, there was something about that place of hopelessness that um, really, really broke me. And so I started to get real honest with my mom about my addiction. And, there was this Christian bookstore over off of Bellflower and Spring. It was called the Lighthouse Christian Bookstore. And so I went there with her, gonna find a book. And I walked in, and I'm praying, okay, God, you got to lead me to the book that's going to change my life. And so we walk in, and there's this huge display right as you walk in, and it's a book called Old Man, New Man. And so I walk over, I pick up the book, and I'm kind of checking it out. And I walk over to the men's section, and looking, I'm praying, okay, God, you got to lead me to the book that's going to change my life. And, it's like Every Man's Battle and Armor of God, like all these men's books. Great. And it was this distinct prompting from the Spirit, Jeff, you've had the book since you walked in. And so I pay for the book, we go home. And the very first chapter is about fatherlessness. And I remember reading it, and it talked about having empathy towards your dad. And I had so much anger and so much resentment towards him. It was such a shocking idea. Like, what? Empathy? Like, all the fighting that took place in the house. I remember one time I had to call the police, threaten to call the police because my dad had snatched my mom up by her throat and pinned her up against the couch. And it was that kind of
How old were
hostile.
you at that time when
Oh gosh, 12, 13, somewhere around there, you know. Um, and the fights it was always over money. It was always over money. And so I had this like anger, resentment. And when it talked about empathy, it asked the question, going back up the tree, family tree, why wasn't your dad able to be who you needed him to be? It's like, well, as I started doing digging, it's, well, because his dad wasn't who he needed him to be. And so my grandfather, I never met him. He had died before I was born, but my grandparents fled Poland during World War II. They were Jews, and they landed here, and my dad was an only child, and his mom died when he was 12. And I learned that, and it was like, oh man, like I can empathize. I can empathize with that. I felt that, you know. And then, his dad was a printer by trade, very successful businessman. And my mom was pregnant with my oldest brother, and they had gone over to my grandfather's house for a barbecue. And my grandfather grabbed a piece of meat off a plate, threw it in his mouth, began to choke, and my dad couldn't get it out. And so he watched his dad die choking on a piece of meat. And I can empathize with that, right? I can't imagine the helplessness, the feeling of helplessness, the fear, and then his whole world is turned upside down. So he inherits, $250,000 in property, a print shop, land, uh, and yet he didn't inherit how to run a business. And so, he takes everything that he has and kind of went like this. So he has this business, decides, if I buy new equipment, then the business will do well. Maxes out the credit cards, buys all new equipment, business doesn't do well. So takes a mortgage out on the house to pay off the credit cards. Business still isn't doing well, maxes out the credit cards again. Second mortgage out on the house, we lose our home, end up in the house that I grew up in. And even now as a father of two little girls, I can empathize further of the pressure that he must have felt and the disappointment that he must have felt that he was to his family. And so it was like these shackles of anger and resentment were undone. And you know, and that was the first step. The second chapter talked about spiritual strongholds that Satan has in our lives. And these moments where we make a conscious decision to walk away from God and give the adversary a foothold in our lives. And that when we start to move away from those sins towards God, that He presses down on those areas of our life. And so I'm desperate, right? Desperate at this point. I'm willing to do whatever the book tells me to do. And so the book said, get down on your knees. So I got down on my knees, said, ask God to reveal the strongholds that are in your life. And so I prayed that, and it wasn't like I had a vision. It was just like memories. Remember, like you remember where you ate breakfast this morning. It was like that, these distinct moments in my life where I knew the right thing to do and I chose to do the wrong thing. And so then it said, renounce Satan in the name of Jesus and ask God to fill that part of your life with the Holy Spirit. And so I did. And it wasn't some crazy shiny white light moment. The heavens didn't open up. I got up, I went to bed, I woke up the next morning, I started reading His Word, and I've done that almost every day for the last 23 years. And, you know, 23 years later, I'm not perfect, but I'm not who I used to be. And the only account that I can give for that is that when I called on Jesus's name, He changed me. He heard me, He answered my cry. And, if you'd have told me this would be my life, I'd have told you bumped your head. I just, it it has been an incredible ride. And, shifting to the mission, I've been here.
Well, real quick, I want to get into that,
Yeah,
but I have so many
yeah,
questions
sure.
through your story. One
Yeah.
one thing that you mentioned, your dad's parents were of the Jewish faith. So
Yeah.
when you were growing up, were you raised in the Jewish faith?
No, actually, my dad became a Christian while he was in the Navy.
Okay.
So that was actually that was a big decision on his part. Came at a cost. But yeah, no, both my grandfather and my grandmother are buried in a Jewish cemetery in the city of Commerce. It's called Mount Carmel Cemetery. And, yeah.
Okay. So that explains that. Also, so you're saying after you read this book that called to you on and Spring and Bellflower. So that's by the 24-hour fitness. Is it in that little area with all the where the pinball deal is there and like I think there's somebody that sells insurance. Is that where you're talking about in that little row there?
So you know where the Jack's Bike Shop is?
Yes.
Same building as that.
Oh, okay. So it was
Yeah, it was
before
right next
24-hour
door.
fitness
Actually,
took
I think
everything
it
over.
became 24-hour fitness. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. All right. Sounds good. I think there was also a barber shop over there as well. Must have been right next to towards that bookstore. So you went to that bookstore,
Yeah.
saying a prayer to yourself, to Jesus. saying, lead me to a book that will help me change my life. You found the book,
Yeah.
you opened it up, you read, you prayed, and then so when you read that book, are you
Yeah.
saying that from that point forward you were sober from drugs?
Yeah.
Whoa, that to
Yeah.
me is extremely powerful in itself. Uh,
Yeah.
the discipline in your faith, and the discipline in yourself, knowing, and I was hearing in your story, knowing that it sounds like you didn't want to be an addict. You had awareness. You were kind of sick of that lifestyle. So knowing that, but knowing that it's so easy, you're saying that, before that, you're like, okay, Tuesday comes around. I'm cool Sunday because that's the day I pray and praise the Lord, and then and then I start my week, and I start to get weak by Monday evening. Those thoughts are in my head, and Tuesday I get paid, and
Yeah.
I get high again. So even with all that, even with that's extreme discipline on your part. Reading this book, and becoming sober for with the love of Jesus, number one, but number two, in the love of yourself as a human being, and knowing that you wanted more for yourself than the life that you were living.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't, it's interesting because when I think about this journey, um, it's not survivor's guilt, but me and this other friend, right? Both got high, 12 years when God brought me out of it. Um, why me and not my friend? He's still out there, right? 23 years later, it's like, you know, there's this stewardship that I feel, a responsibility, where it's not like, oh, I had the fortitude within me to say, this is what I want. I was strung out and hopeless. And the only hope was that God would intervene in my life. And so having done that, right, how should I then live? And there is a discipline piece because I wake up in the morning and Jesus tells us that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. And so I know no matter how bad my day is, no matter how turned over my heart is, that I need to be in his word. And from his word, he gives me encouragement and consoles my heart and gives me perspective and wisdom and challenges me, rebukes me. Um, and so every morning I wake up and I've been doing this for 23 years. I hand copy sections of scripture. So I've got this stack of journals, and I'll work through a book and I'll just paragraph by paragraph. Right now, I'm in the Gospel of Matthew. If hand copied all the Psalms, Deuteronomy, I mean, numbers of books, and there's something about slowing down, praying, like you're thinking, you're reading, you're touching, you're writing. There's something about that just creates a pace and a rhythm that allows for me to hear his voice, understand. Um, but yeah, I think, but for the grace of God, uh, you know, I would either, I was talking to my wife about this. My wife's an ER nurse. She works at South Bay. And there was a guy who had come in who had just blown his body up on drugs and ultimately died while he was there. And she said, because my wife's never known me on drugs, I was sober when I met her. She's like, if there was something about that moment where I was like, that could have been you. And I told her, yeah, like I would either have overdosed or killed myself. That was the space that I was in when God found me. And so now coming out of that with the people that we serve here at the mission, there's just an incredible hope, this confident expectation that what God has done in my life, like anybody who walks through the doors of the rescue mission, he can do that in their lives too. And even beyond that, that we're we're all escape artists. right? None of us like pain. And my escape was through drugs, but we all have escapes, right? It could be success, it could be relationships, it could be money. I mean, we're all trying to find something that makes the pain go away. And when we finally come to the realization that there's only one who can truly fill our hearts with a love and a grace and a forgiveness and an acceptance that utterly changes us, then we're going to keep running and chasing and pursuing. Uh, when I was pastoring at Bethany, I told the church the difference between the church and the mission is that at the mission, the moment somebody walks through the doors, they're saying, I need help, right? That need is right in front of them. That at the church, it's like I got to convince you that there's a problem before I can introduce you to the redemptive solution. And it's like we don't, because we don't see ourselves as having such a great physical, emotional, spiritual, need. Uh, it sometimes is a little harder for us to connect the dots to how desperately we need his involvement in our lives.
I want to touch base with your career path there because I would imagine once you read that book, obviously that probably changed your career path. I want to get into that, but I
Yeah.
just wanted to ask this question because it brought in my head. So this person that when you were 11 years old, that was 5 years older, that you looked up to, for guidance and ways, right? Because you thought this person was cool and a way to live their life, and obviously you decided to go a different path than this other person. But I think you alluded to this person is still alive,
Mhm.
and how much interaction do you have with this person to 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 this
No.
day?
Yeah, I knew because we were like, he was my best friend and my worst enemy.
Yeah,
It was a super dysfunctional relationship, and I knew that I couldn't stay sober and be around him, and that I would need to cut him out of my life. And so it's hard to do when you live 3 houses away from a person. But I remember I would go and I would peek around the corner of my garage to see if they were outside, and if they were, I'd go back in. And it's been 23 years, and I not like I'm worried that if we were to run into each other or have a conversation, that I'm going to jump back into, an addiction. But I think that there's this understanding that, well, Jesus talks about in the Sermon on the Mount, he says, if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off. It's better for you to enter life with one hand than to have both hands and to be cast into hell. And his point isn't, you know, uh, uh, his point is this: you have to deal drastically with sin. Now it goes further because if my hand causes me to stumble, if my foot causes me to stumble, my eye causes, like, we're going to have to cut our heart out is really what it comes down to. But in taking that drastic step, I had to remove myself from the situation. I had to surround myself with people who were going to speak truth into my life, who are going to hold me accountable for the way that I live. And that really is the church in its purest form. I started attending Bethany Church in, gosh, I had been sober for maybe, oh, yeah, I wasn't even sober when I got to Bethany, and then started to get involved with the college ministry. And it was at that point that, I started to get real honest with other people about what was going on in my life. Had this, life-changing experience of, surrendered to God. And everybody at the college group knew my story. That was real trend. I also had tattoos and didn't look like anybody and still smoked cigarettes and would be out in front of the church. So everybody kind of knew where I was coming from. And so there was this core group of guys that every time they saw me, they would ask me, Jeff, how many days do you have? And it was like I had people who really loved and cared about me enough to remember me when they saw me to ask, how many days do you have, Jeff? And I never wanted to tell them zero. And so I
How many?
remember,
So you're asking how many days were you sober in a row? Is that
yeah,
what they were asking?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. How many days has it been since you last got high? Um, and So, fast forward a few years, and one of them, my buddy Steve Sislov, he was getting married, and it was his wedding. And, it was a beautiful ceremony. I had to take off, and they're doing their rounds to all the tables. And so I go up to him, to just tell him I love him, say, hey, man, it's really beautiful. I'm happy for you guys. And before I could start saying anything, he looked at me and he said, Jeff, how many days do you have? And then I tell you, for somebody who on a day that's all about him and his wife, to think of me and that kind of relationship, man, that it I don't know. That that's the kind of um, love I think we're all searching for, right? Is to have somebody who cares that deeply about us, that it's demonstrated in, you know, just thinking about others and not about self. So yeah.
With that being said, uh, do you do you through social media and through the grapevine of Long Beach, do you know information on that friend of yours?
Yeah, so my brother still visits. He was friends with my brother before he was friends with me. So my brother still interacts with them. He knows what's been going on in my life. So it's not like we're you know completely disconnected. I mean, my brother's the link, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. Just trying to stay focused on what I have in front of me. And pray for him.
Right on. All right, well, let's move on from that. So, you're now in a situation where you read the book. You have these great friends they're reaching out to you on a daily basis to ask you when the last time you used. I would imagine that kind of reshaped the kind of career path that you were looking to go through. And you said you started in the Bethany College Ministry. Is that kind of where you were at there? Was this a
Yeah.
volunteer position, or were you getting income from
No, no, no,
working?
no. I was just attending. I was a
Oh, okay.
college. I was 23 and, college pastor at the time, a guy named Matt Sweeney. He's become a dear friend. Just very influential, believed in me, and created opportunities for me to share. I grew up in the church, so it wasn't a lack of knowledge, it was a lack of application.
Hmm.
I knew all the stories, and so in getting into the college ministry, it was then taking everything I knew and beginning to apply it to my life. And so I was at Long Beach City College. I played trombone through junior high and high school. I get sober. I'm still at City, and was trying to figure out what path do I want to take, and uh, love jazz. Thought I'll do a performance major and be a starving musician for the rest of my life. And yet, I'm having these opportunities to serve and, got involved in short-term missions over at Bethany Church and, led a group of missionaries to inner city Chicago for a week in the summer and, start taking teams out to help with the Hurricane Katrina relief effort. And my heart is just stirring for, for ministry. And I remember my sister asked me, um, Jeff, what do you wake up in the morning thinking about? You should probably be doing that. And I thought, man, I do not wake up in the morning thinking about music. I wake up in the morning thinking about God. And so that was this pivotal moment where, it was like, okay, I want to start taking seriously this call to ministry.
I just want to
Um,
pause you 1 second. So, what were you doing at this point in time to pay the bills?
I was living with my mom. I was working for a electrical contractor. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's longer stories to all of these things, but
So
Uh,
you're now at the path where like you're not thinking about music, you're thinking about uh,
yeah.
the Lord, the God, and so that changed your pathway.
Yeah, so I started to focus on just finishing all my general education requirements, and then God opened the door for me to start here at the rescue mission back in 2006. So uh, one of the members at the church was also on the board of directors here at the mission, knew my story, came to me, said, "Hey, I think you should pray about getting involved at the mission. I really think your story would intersect well with the people that we're serving over there." And so I took him very seriously, and I started praying, and started volunteering, and then during an executive leadership transition was invited to come on, was part-time for about 6 months, and they said you're supposed to be here, so they brought me on full time, and so I've served here in different leadership roles for 20 years. I love the mission. I love the mission of the mission. I love the people that we serve. I'm dressed the way I'm dressed today because the first Tuesday of every month I go out on street outreach. So went and hit this alley that I drive by every day. It's on Long Beach Boulevard and PCH, and it's just the encampment has ebbed and flowed, and I just wanted to go visit the people there, and invite them into shelter and pray with them. And Yeah, I got I was on staff for 18, was program director, so I oversaw all the men's, women's programs. In 2018, I got called away to be the lead pastor of Bethany Church, my church. During the 4 years I was away, I was on the
That
board of
Bethany
directors
Church, is
here.
that the one on Clark?
Yeah, Clark and Los Coyotes.
Okay, yeah.
Big people. Yeah. Yeah. And then in June of 22, God called me back, and I've been back for 4 years, and it's just been incredible. Leaving the church, career path wise. So I don't even maybe the calling path. I don't know if I don't really think about it in terms of a career. It's just kind of being where God has placed me. But I get to Bethany, and it was 4 really unusual, difficult years, including the global pandemic. It was kind of my last 2 years there. And I had worked with the CEO that was here before me for 10 years on staff, 3 as a director. So this change happens, the position opens up, and I didn't feel any release by God from the church to pursue this position. And there were a lot of staff that came through the program while I was directing that were very hopeful that I was going to come back. Or one of them, just the look in her eyes when she said, "Are you coming back?" And I said, "No, I don't feel like God's released me to pursue this." So I said, "I'm here to help. I'll help in whatever way I can." So I'm bouncing back and forth between the church and the mission. I'm running program and operations, pastoring, and we brought in an interim director in November of 21, and it was a disaster. And within 2 months, had to shift gears, let that person go. And it was at that point that God started to tug on my heart. And there were a couple things. The first was just this sense that there was nobody more qualified in the city of Long Beach to step into this role than I was. And I don't say that pridefully, just everything that God had done in my life. My education, my experience on over a decade of mission experience. And this is a unique calling, and we serve a beautiful population, but it's not what everybody's called to do. And so I started to sense this tug, and I felt really turned over. This January of 22, I felt like, of course, I was supposed to go back, and then I felt like I was betraying the church for even praying about it. It was this weird dynamic, and I had this dream. Not that God speaks to me in dreams all the time, but this was a very short, very impactful dream. And in the dream, somebody asked me about the mission, and I said, when I'm at the mission, it's like breathing. It's just it's who I am. It's what I know. It's everything I love. You know, so then, I started asking people to pray. I know he's calling me back at this point, go through a national search. Uh, and it's May of 22. It's down to me and one other candidate. And, I'm selfishly praying about how I can get this amazing team at the church to come with me. And it was this distinct prompting from the Spirit. Jeff, that's not my will for their lives, but this is my will for yours. And everything you need to do what I'm calling you to do, I'm going to provide. And he's done that in some incredibly extravagant ways. And I would welcome anybody who's listening. You, Paul, come down, take a tour. I will share some stories that will just warm your heart of the ways that God's answered that. Um, but then the other thing he put on my heart, and this is, I don't know, it's not weird to me, but sometimes people think it's weird. Um, but it's the most persistent prompting I've had in life. Every morning I wake up, I think about this, that this is my last ministry calling. And whatever that means doesn't really matter to me. There's this abiding conviction that before the foundations of the world were set, this is what God created me to do. And everything I've experienced in life, from growing up in poverty to addiction to recovery, my time on staff, my education, my time at the church, has prepared me for this. And it's like breathing. And, you know, I don't know how to describe. I know not everybody has this kind of clarity, but there is like freedom that comes from knowing this is the race that I have to run and I want to finish well. And so, how do I steward the relationships, the resources, the vision in a way that glorifies God while fulfilling His purpose for my life? And you know, there's a lot of joy in that in that space.
That's extremely powerful. With the transition back to the rescue mission that you were at Bethany, is that still that's still the place that you worship, or have you changed?
No, yeah, no. It's just kind of how it works. So they've got a new lead pastor. God's continuing to do great things through Ben and the staff there. But yeah, no, we attend Soundhouse Church. I got to tell you, church is really hard for me, and not like it's hard for me. How do I want to describe it? I think I left pastoral ministry with just a lot of like questions. Like mostly, what was that? It was, like I said, 4 very unusual years. And I would say, that the things that I love about church, right? Fellowship, teaching, community, accountability, doing life with other people, that shared conviction, shared hope. Uh, I think we make it more complicated than it needs to be. And I feel much more creedal in my convictions about church. What I mean by that is, if we can agree on the things we'll die for, then there's not like, I just want to work, you know. I'm not having conversations, I call them luxury conversations, about spiritual gifts and roles in ministry and all that. Like when you're out in the courtyard with somebody who's blown their life up, it's really not that relevant.
Yeah.
Uh, and I don't want to say that those conversations aren't important or meaningful, um, but, and I don't want to say I don't care, but in another sense, it's like I just want to do what God created me to do and fulfill that calling in my life. But when I do go to church, it never fails. As soon as I step out of the car into the parking lot, there's a flood of emotions because I miss the people. I don't miss the role, and I pray for all of the lead pastors that I know every Sunday. I'll shoot a text, say, man, pray for you because it's not easy. not an
Yeah.
easy, not an easy role. Yeah,
It was interesting that you bring that point up, and I think that in my travels and talking with people about Christianity, whether what denomination that you believe in, um, I think that one thing that people if you kind of leave the church, not you specifically, but people that I've talked to that kind of left the church in a way, and it speaks to my faith in God and Jesus is strong, but I'm just sick of organized religion
yeah,
where sometimes it feels like it's more of a business than a faith. And as a result of that, I've seen people break out of whatever church.
yeah,
It's not just one; it's all
yeah.
because of that feeling. And it sounds like there's a sense that was kind of the case with you in that situation.
No, I don't think it's a leaving the church, and it's definitely not a crisis of faith.
Hmm.
I think the ecclesiology, right? My beliefs about the church, who the church is. The church is the bride of Christ.
Yeah.
So you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right?
Hmm.
Because Christ died for his church.
Hmm.
And so how, like when I was pastoring, gosh, I felt like I was holding something so precious to Jesus. And you're just like, man, God, help me not. There's so many stories of church hurt, church pain, failed leaders. It's like, oh, God, help me not contribute to that narrative. Because people have left the church, and sometimes for good reason,
Hmm.
right? And I think we all carry our church wounds. I remember reading a commentary on First Corinthians. It was written by a guy named John Stott. I'll never forget how he opened it. He said, "The church is a fellowship of sinners before it's a fellowship of saints." And so if we expect that we're not going to find brokenness in the church, then we're going to have really unmet expectations, right? So it's not that kind of posture that I've left with. Like when I go to church on Sunday mornings, I go to Soundhouse Church, or I'll do some pulpit supply and fill in. I miss teaching. I love teaching God's truth and sharing those things. But um, that sense of purpose, like I don't want to do church. I want to be the church, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
right? I don't want faith to be a place I go on Sunday mornings where, you know, I wear clean clothes and I put on some, cologne and smile like everything's okay and then, leave and I'm just torn up. Like I want authentic community relationships. Um, and and a lot of that has to do with me, right? Like if I want that, I also have to be willing to give that, which means I've got to make myself available, my life available. There has to be transparency and authenticity on my part. I can't demand from others something I'm not willing to give myself. Um, so yeah, I don't know if that muddied the water even further, but yeah, I think that you know the organized religion piece. I'm even careful with that because I think there is a authentic pursuit of what life and relationship with Jesus can look like um, in the hearts of of churches. I think collectively we can do more for the kingdom of God together than we could separate. And I think we're yeah, I don't know. Anyways,
Okay. Well, no, I appreciate the answer. I think the point you made about the article that person wrote about uh, the collective. If you're looking for the collective to be perfect, then you're going to be disappointed, and that I think that speaks volumes in itself. There, shifting gears back to the rescue mission, you're the CEO, and I think that's a lot of strength of your faith. Um, and I understand that you've had 10 years of experience into it and your faith in God and Jesus. through the process of that gave you the strength and the courage of it. But I still think it's pretty powerful. Somebody who's never done that position before, to have that much strength and not really have that anxiety of, man, oh, this is pretty big role that I'm taking on. And it sounds like you didn't really have that. So that's a very powerful notion in itself. So now that you have this position, you've had it now. Got what's 2022. So for at least over 4 years now. What have you learned about yourself? What have you learned about your faith? And what is the mission that you're trying to push the mission forward to?
Yeah, yeah. Getting called back, um, in the last 4 years, there's been such a work of renewal happening at the mission that at times it feels other. Like, is this real life? Like that kind of a feeling. I come back 2 decades of deferred maintenance. These buildings were falling apart, water damage, termite damage, the roofs. I mean, it would rain in the chapel, it would rain in the dorms. And since getting back, there's not a building we have that hasn't been taken apart and put back together, from the roofs to the door frames of the doors and everything in between. And when you come through here, and again, plug for come take a tour. Uh, I jokingly say we're the Ritz Carlton of shelters. And you come through, it is beautiful. And, the attention to detail and the investment in the dignity of the precious souls that we're serving. Uh, but it's also been a season of growth. Like in the last 3 years, we'll have opened 3 new shelters targeting very specific subpopulations within the homeless community. So a 15-bed shelter for men with disabilities. In March, we opened a 12-bed shelter for young men 18 to 24, which is a growing population that we're seeing seeking services, kids age out of the foster care system, and a number of other situations. But then right outside the office, under construction right now, is a 3-story, 60-bed shelter for women and children that, Lord willing, should open in October. And so being in a place that I love so much and watching it just redeemed and restored and repaired and prepared for years of future ministry. I mean, I got the best seat in the house. I love it. And it really is like breathing. I mean, the vision's clear. It's like I know what needs to be done. I feel uniquely equipped to know how to do it. Going back to the role, it I don't know. I've seen titles change people, and I'm real sensitive to that. That my identity is not president and CEO. Right? My identity is I am Jeff Levine, and God, in His mercy and grace, set His affection on me and gave my life purpose in me. And so while I operate in this role, it's not what defines me. It's not what makes me valuable, defines my worth. And so I have to be real careful and sensitive to that because people can get caught up in it. Like I said, I've watched. And so while I accept the title as part of the role, I really just want to work, right? Like I just provide the things that I need to do, what I need to do, and let me get to it. Yeah, so I don't know. It is miraculous to me, to know where I was 23 years ago, right? Like I can still be like when I shot up and I laid back on the bed and I closed my eyes and prayed that I wouldn't wake up anymore. Like I remember that so like it was yesterday. And now to and not that these are markers of success, but just like the grace of God in my life to have been married to my wife for 18 years, to have two very sweet, very feisty little girls, an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old daughter, to have been at the mission now for 20 years, to own our home, growing up in a slum, to there's times I sit in the den at our house in Long Beach, and it'll be like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. I'll be drinking a cup of coffee, doing my devotion, and I'll just stop and I'll think, man, like this is crazy. This this is crazy. This is my life.
Yeah.
This is my life. And what a grace, but what a responsibility, right? What a responsibility.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds to me that if those changes didn't happen, you wouldn't have the family that you have today. You wouldn't have the wife that you have today. You wouldn't have the girls that you have today. If it wasn't for the
Yeah.
changes that you've done in your life, you're spiritually, emotionally, physically, everything to change the energy of your
Yeah.
life so that those things could be your life. And that's very, very powerful. I should have asked this question earlier, but I'm going to ask it now. As far as the Long Beach Rescue Mission, tell us a little bit about what the mission is of it, because maybe people don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, so Long Beach Rescue Mission is a place of healing and hope, serving the greater Long Beach community by improving the quality of life, the hurting and the homeless, by loving and equipping them to be reconciled to God through a relationship with Jesus, to self, to family, and to society. And so we have, well, will be 287 beds to provide, shelter and life-changing programs to men, women, and children experiencing homelessness in the city. And we offer high accountability programming. So there's approximately 3,700 people in the city experiencing homelessness on a given day. We have 287 beds. We feel like it's a privilege and not a right to get to be here. And so if you're going to be here, we expect that you're taking steps to move from a place of dependence on us to a place of independence back out into society. And we will do whatever is within our power to help you accomplish that. And if you're not ready to do that, or you're not interested in doing that, then we'll invite you to leave and make room for somebody who's at a place where they're ready to take those steps. And so we have a case management program, we have a discipleship life recovery program, we provide food for the community, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, anywhere from 500 to 700 meals a day. We do street outreach, and and God has been at work at the mission for 54 years. It'll be 54 years this Friday. So
So if you are listening to this and you need that type of help, how could they reach out to you or the mission to get that help that they need?
yeah, they can either go on our website and click, get help. And we've got links that you can go through that way. They can call. My email address is on there. Welcome to email me. Do the best we can to serve as many people as we can.
Mhm. And if you're hearing this and you want to get more involved, whether it be helping, volunteering or monetarily to help the mission, or want to take a tour like you mentioned before, how would you do that?
You can go to www.lbrn.org and you'll find information there under ways to help, information for our volunteer coordinator, and again, my information's all out there on the web. So if you wanted to give me a call, or if you wanted to shoot me an email, I'm guessing you might be able to link that information
Yep.
with this. Um, Please do, and I know that and one of my favorite comments, and I love giving tours. I love telling the stories of how God's at work here. But one of the comments that I always get was, "I don't know what I thought this place would be like, but this isn't what I thought it would be like." And the beauty of this space, the commitment to dignity, I think you'll leave encouraged knowing that there are people here who are really trying to practice what Jesus commands and loving our neighbors. We love ourselves.
Before I let you go, I got a couple questions for you. But one thing I want to ask you is there anything that you would like to express to our audience that we didn't address yet in this interview?
Yeah, we can't do what we do here at the Rescue Mission without the support of our community. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about Long Beach is it's a city that has a giving heart. And we are just incredibly thankful here at the mission for the support of our community. and for your partnership in doing the work that we do. So I think it's just expressing my gratitude for everybody.
Before I let you go, I always like to end on a fun little question. You
Yeah,
were born and raised in Long Beach, so I'm sure you got some spots. Where do you like to
yeah.
eat in town?
So my favorite spot is Amatoli over on Third and Long Beach Boulevard, downtown, Lebanese cuisine. Super clean food, great atmosphere, gets you into the downtown area. So Amatoli, not uncommon to find me there. So
Right on. I've gone there many times, and I echo it. It's a great, great, great place to eat.
yeah,
Jeff, you know what? Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being vulnerable, and thank you for the work that you're doing in the community and in life in general.
yeah. Thanks, Paul. Appreciate the opportunity to share.
It's been a long beach thing.